we want to return to the theme we started this morning, which was digital transformation, digital access, rights, and digital inequalities. We spoke about it for a couple of different perspectives. Now we're going to look at the situation in Pakistan, which, as many of you know, will be up for an election very soon. And as is often the case when elections take place in countries, the media scene, especially social media, but not only social media, is quite fragmented and it can get very nasty at times. So with us right now is Nighat, a human rights lawyer and founder of the Digital Rights Foundation. She was a TED Global follower for 2017 and has been listed as Time's Next Generation Leader. So she's going to talk to us about the situation in her home country, in Pakistan. And after that, we can talk about some of the issues she brings up, because what she describes in Pakistan is not only a phenomena in Pakistan. Unfortunately, it is echoed and mirrored in many other countries around the world. So if you have questions afterwards, I really invite you to engage with us in a discussion. Thank you, Nighat.
Thank you for the introduction, Christine, and thanks to Global Media Forum for inviting me. I see how my TED and Mozilla talks get me invited on various events and conferences, most of the time with no concrete actions out of these talks. We talk, we go back, forget about what we say in these conferences, and get busy in our hectic lives. But I hope and I'm sure that this one will start a conversation and ultimately joint action. The topic that has given to me is very wide, digital rights and global action plan. And I thought we can't talk about the global action plan without contextualizing the issues related to digital rights. And I would like to start from fake news, false news, misinformation, you just name it. A very criticized term that I really don't like to use. What has it done to the political landscape around the world? The US presidential elections of 2016 were reflective of the fact that misinformation leaves no one behind. We are all aware of the claims that Russian social media troll armies has supposedly played in these elections, and we already know what has happened with Facebook after Cambridge Analytica leaks. There's a lot that we know, and there's a lot that we are yet to know, like what social media companies are doing to stop the misuse of their platforms during the democratic elections worldwide. I come from a beautiful and conflicted land that is never out of the headlines, a land that has produced people like Nobel laureate Dr. Abdus Salam, and is the home country of everyone's favorite and dearest Malala Yousafzai. I mentioned Pakistan because Mark Zuckerberg mentioned it during the hearings in the US Congress. He said something along the lines that Pakistan is going to have its general elections, and we expect something of this sort to happen there also. Pakistan is going to have its general elections in almost a month from now. A lot of people are confused about who to vote, and they're looking for a lesser evil to vote for. But these elections are specifically going to be interesting. All political parties and candidates are making the most of social media platforms to promote their policies, manifestos, agendas, actions as the elections approach. But it's important to consider what kind of online content they are producing. Since the title of the conference is Global Inequality, I cannot miss mentioning that we are still struggling with gender inequality across the globe in all aspects of life. When we talk in the context of politics and elections, developing countries like Pakistan witnesses, to say the least, a disgusting display of misogyny both online and offline. Then there's also misinformation, a phenomena that all of us are familiar with, about women politicians. I'll give you a recent example. One of our country's political parties gave a ticket to a convicted rapist of an artist to contest elections. Because thankfully, the world never forgets. People soon pointed it out, and he was subsequently expelled from the party after the uproar in the online space. But during this incident, somebody made a fake Twitter account of that artist and through a tweet commended the efforts of the political party expelling the rapist. There are two very problematic repercussions at play here. One is that this snatched the agency of the survivor and victim to express her concerns over this fiasco. And second problematic aspect is that the political party particularly benefited from this incident because by the face of it, thousands of people saw the victim celebrating the forced efforts of the party. But all of it didn't end here. Instead, our mainstream media picked up the tweet, released articles and stories around this misinformation, furthering the lies and political agendas of political parties right before the elections. At the point, I'm reminded of all the practices that journalists are supposed to be adhering to while reporting on any issues whatsoever. A lot of people argue that the onus of countering misinformation shouldn't fall on the journalists because they are not the ones propagating it. But there are also times when journalists or mainstream media at large fan the flames, spreading somebody's lies in the name of sensationalism and breaking the news. I may not be the person you would want to hear ethics of journalism from, but one thing that I know for sure is fact-checking and verification should be mandatory when stories are picked up from online spaces and shouldn't be neglected even for the tiniest of stories. For all we know, we could have started a nuclear war in 2017 because of fake news, when Pakistan's Minister of Defense responded to one of Israeli minister's fake Twitter account. Media houses have a responsibility to own the content that goes to the public from their platform. Strict editorial policy is essential. I can't emphasize enough how much it's essential. If I talk about Pakistan, we have a total of 18% of internet penetration, and we have a population of more than 200 million people. So a lot of content which is shared online reaches a small number of people in the online spaces compared to the reach of mainstream media that has a viewership in even the remotest areas of Pakistan. I can't comment on how true it is for the rest of the world, but for our mainstream media, they pick up their news most of the time from social media, which do reach out to millions of people. That brings me to think about the responsibilities of social media platforms in combating misinformation on their websites. What is their action plan against all of this? Mark Zuckerberg repeatedly said during one of the hearings in the light of Cambridge Analytica that Facebook is responsible for the content on its platform. So what are they doing to stop the spreading of misinformation? What are all of them doing? Google, Twitter, Facebook. There's also a personal example of how I was accused of spreading misinformation. Some of you may know that 2000, especially people who cover Asia, that 2017 started on a very upsetting note of enforced disappearances for the journalists, bloggers, and activists in Pakistan. The wave of these disappearances is still in effect. By all means, this was the attack on the citizens' freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to privacy. Because these abductions create fear among people and force them to self-censor themselves in the online spaces. But this last incident that just happened recently highlighted another very important aspect. While all of the cases of these abductions that were made public were of men, recently, this month, a renowned woman human rights activist and journalist, Gul Bukhari, was abducted for a short time period. Of course, netizens spoke, and they spoke left, right, and center, but the ones who supported her abduction were targeting her on a personal level. Oh, look what she was wearing. She deserved it. Oh, look, she was smoking. Good that she's gone. She deserved to be raped. And the ones who wanted her to return were defending her character more than her work. I had an unfortunate experience while condemning an incitement to violence against her. A recent graduate from one of the best engineering universities from Pakistan, he basically tweeted, He tweeted, "Sexual torture would be perfect for this." I can't say it. All I did was ask the university to explain what kind of students they are producing. The reaction was strong, and the man deleted his tweets, ultimately labeling me a liar and for spreading fake news. But that's not to say that I didn't have help. The active bystanders on Twitter joined me and took the university to task. Eventually, the man apologized. I'm assuming he was pressured by the university. The point is that women experience online spaces differently than men. And B, by promoting counter-narrative, we can end an ordeal on a positive note, one that sides with the victim and not the abuser. Because law, technology, tools, policies can't be the answer to everything in the online spaces. Then again, tools, technology, laws, policies do play a strong role most of the times. Amnesty International just did a report on a malicious malware attacks against human rights defenders and journalists from Pakistan. The report was titled, "Pakistan, Human Rights Under Surveillance." Another report that the Digital Rights Foundation released in December 2016, titled "Surveillance of Female Journalists in Pakistan," revealed that female journalists were under various kinds of surveillance throughout their career. The surveillance that they experience in their line of work, they mostly take it for granted. But they seemed to be more concerned about another kind of surveillance, the kind that we call social or societal surveillance. One journalist said, "Social surveillance online has sometimes tremendous effect on my mental health, and I felt violated." Another journalist said, "It's not just one person telling you that you don't belong here. It's a number of people, and that constant refrain can be very intimidating, and one starts to feel concerned." The emotional and personal toll of surveillance causes immense stress among journalists around the world, which most of the times leads to self-censor and their ability to work. This is not just in Pakistan, but it's true across the world. See Egypt, see Malaysia, see Turkey. We celebrated World Press Freedom Day last month, but our conversations on that day were focused on freeing the press, not freed press. The draconian practices of surveillance and monitoring by the governments around the world to control free speech and dissent leaves a chilling effect on the overall freedoms of the countries. This brings me to the point of advocating around the need of governments in global north, west, Europe to regulate the import of surveillance technologies in countries where democracies are endangered and repressive regimes. Several digital rights organizations have been working on mitigating risks that arise when people work in hostile conditions. We advocate for strong digital security not only because human rights advocates are vulnerable to hacking and cyber attacks, but they are also constantly under surveillance. In one part of the world, the vulnerability is increased through insecure servers of the world's largest biometric databases, like in my country, or Aadhaar cards in India. And on the other part of the world, we have legislations like GDPR that holds companies accountable for their misconduct in terms of weak data protection policies. The absence of any data protection laws in countries give corporations a safe haven to put their problematic and invasive practices in action without having to face the repercussions, and that I see in my country a lot. Now, as I say this, I wonder how easy it is to physically threaten or harm someone based on their digital information. Human rights defenders, journalists, and lawyers have found themselves particularly vulnerable of these attacks. We can't possibly stop the selling of this data or the breach of user privacy on multiple levels. What we can do is to strengthen our data protection protocols, demand better legislations, policies, and eventually accountability in case of improper implementation of these policies. While as journalists, human rights defenders, and advocates of open access, we can't bring a revolution in a matter of days, But what we can do is to provide support to people and advocate for a stronger mechanism. We have seen how Germany enacted a law to control hate speech and misinformation and trying to hold social media companies accountable. And I'm not sure how citizens and netizens of this country are finding this law. This may be not the answer. Facebook have recently rolled out some features to combat fake news. But is this enough? There are multiple actors around the world finding solutions to address issues related to internet freedom and digital rights. We, as a non-profit organization in Pakistan, started Region's first cyber harassment helpline, where people can seek help related to online violence and violation of their digital rights in general. Reclaiming our digital rights in this digital age is tough and complex battle, and it's a long process. And our efforts are just a foot in the door. But I believe we'll get there. We'll get to the point where the onus of protecting oneself from online abuse is not put on the victims, where women and their bodies are no longer used as a weapon in dirty politics, where people are free to exercise the rights they were born with without fighting for them, where journalists are free to perform their jobs without being threatened and surveilled, where free speech is actually free, where dissent is taken as constructive criticism and not threat to power, and where everyone has equal right to live in the offline and online spaces. Until then, we'll just have to fight a little harder and a little longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Nighat. Why don't you come forward so we can have a conversation with our audience here. Guests can ask questions. I'd like to start it off. You began your presentation talking about the problem of fake news. It's a problem. You gave a couple of concrete examples in Pakistan. You mentioned worldwide it is a problem. We're here at the Global Media Forum. Lots of journalists are involved. What do you see as, if you could name one first step journalists should undertake to help prevent the spread of fake news? What would that be?
I think...
Oops, I think it's on now.
I feel I have already mentioned that, but I guess when there are several verification processes that journalists, when they are in the online spaces and when they are picking up content from online spaces, they have more responsibility than a normal internet user. And I think they really need to look into what are the actual editorial policies of their media house, or at least they learn this in their training, the verification processes of a news. So I guess first treat online spaces seriously. And when they are picking up news, there are several ways to verify that news. So I guess this is one thing, but also misinformation, false news, fake news is so pervasive at the moment in the online spaces, specifically in the jurisdictions where elections are expected in just, in the near future. So I believe that it's so important. I mean, I know that the practices are different, and the way journalists do their jobs, they are different in different jurisdictions. But I think there are like basic things that they can do. And the first thing is, to verify, what kind of news they are picking up.
Okay. I have a few more questions. Let's give the audience a couple. Yeah, here right front. Wait till the microphone comes. And if you could introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, that'd be great.
Hello, I'm from Mariha. I'm Mariha and I'm from Bangladesh. Well, I'm actually a PhD student, but I do some freelance journalism on the side. My question was regarding the law that you just mentioned, that Germany's enacted a law to control hate speech. Do you not think that that's a direct attack on democracy and freedom of speech?
Yeah, so that's why I said that because I had to respond to the Global Action Plan. And, you see how governments are responding in the form of enacting new legislations and new policies and regulations. And that's why I said I'm not sure how this law is, how people are benefiting from this law. I feel that this can be an attack on free speech in the online spaces because that's something that we have seen in Pakistan. We enacted our legislation on Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act in 2016 in the name of protecting women from cyber harassment and online violence. But now what we have seen in 2 years, that this law was mainly used to control dissent in the online space.
Exactly, because in my country, they enacted a few laws along those lines, and what basically happened is it has curtailed any criticism of the current government. But would you, as an activist, have any recommendations? Do you have an example in mind of a nation or a state that has done something to control hate speech without, so to speak, banning it?
Without restricting also information and communication.
So, like I'm not sure if, if you look at the examples of different countries, be it the West or the global South or developing countries, the trend that I have seen in developing countries, to control dissent, like mainly they say to control cybercrime, but actually the reason is to control dissent or political content in the online space. And I myself haven't found any good example of a law or regulation in any country which sort of, address the issue, but at the same time do not hinder or violate free speech or fundamental rights in the online space.
Thank you.
So what would the better solution be if you think that legislation is going in the opposite direction of what we want to achieve? Where would you recommend starting?
I think there are multiple solutions to this, and one solution cannot be answer to all the issues related to not just the fake news, but several things that are happening. And I guess sometimes, people say that technology and tools could be the answer. I say no. You need to mix different solutions together. But one thing that I have seen that governments and tool developers, like they are ready to take action in terms of enacting new laws or making new tools. But I feel the answer is actually integrating the knowledge of digital literacy in our society. The lack of awareness is something that is just profound, that what we have seen in our society. And I see the legislation is there in Pakistan for the last 2 years, and people don't even know what constitutes cybercrime. And then they do things unintentionally, and then somebody can just make a case against them, and they can put behind the bars for 7 years or 3 years. So it's like really draconian when the governments are just, jump onto making new legislations and policies. So I don't know there is one answer to this. There are like mix of solutions that people need to adopt, but also look into their own context. It's very important that we cannot use a tool that is made by someone sitting in San Francisco, a digital security tool that can be used in Pakistan or Bangladesh, because, encryption is illegal there. So I think one needs to look at the context and contextualize what are the strategies they are adopting.
Okay, more questions? Oh, a couple here. Right here.
It's also a question, but it's also...
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Saida Khadija from Pakistan. I'm a law student and a journalist also, and an activist, you can say, in a way, in a hidden way.
That's going live, actually.
Okay, so it is a question, and it's also that this is something that I want to draw your attention to. There is this FIA organization where you can report harassment, and it was some years back. There was something I felt like harassed online about something, and I contacted that FIA official page, and there was that, I don't remember the name of it, it was some Captain Saqib or something, and he was like, I saw it that he was trying to help people, but before that he was trying to make every girl feel guilty and trying to make them morally lecture them, and before saying that, okay, we are here to help you and we are going, but why don't our sisters just be the Sharia law abiding, pious Muslim women to avoid the occurrence of such situations at all. If you were rightly practicing Muslim, this wouldn't have happened at all to you. Why do you have this openness of attitude that men can have access to you to harass you in the first place? So
your question is...
I wanted to draw your attention to this, and I wanted to ask that, is there any way of, screening this thing also? Because the men that are sitting there are also a part of the same patriarchal society, and they have the same mindset.
Okay. So the question
what can be done
what can we do to prevent them from publishing out there these hateful comments?
Yeah, Khadija, I mean, I can completely understand what you said, because through the helpline, we actually work with Federal Investigation Agency, and most of the time when we referred complainants to them, the complainants come back to us and they say, they do victim blaming, and this is the larger problem of the society, because of the, I mean, you yourself mentioned that it's a patriarchal society and male dominant, and this is the kind of justification they basically give to the women victims and survivors of online harassment. And they basically, first of them, they feel that it's their responsibility to tell them not to use online spaces under, what our religion or culture says. But we are trying to change this norm. We are working with them, and changing mindset and behavior that has developed over the centuries, I would say. It's not easy. And I hope that we'll get there, but it's a very slow and long process, and maybe, our next generations will see some change and, their attitude towards women.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Maybe the two of you can meet afterwards and have that conversation. Let me ask you here.
Okay, hello, thank you very much. I'm Isabella Kurkowski, country representative of Deutsche Welle Academy in Myanmar. So it was very interesting, and thank you very much for this comprehensive insight. And you mentioned data protection agencies and institutions as something what is indeed needed. So my question is, do you have in Pakistan a right to information law or access to information law, which is usually very much bound to the enforcement, establishment of data protection agencies? And it's also quite interesting to see that the digitalization is so much really developing, and on the other side, data protection measures are probably missing. So. Thank you.
I mean, one legislation that I'm very proud of is the Right to Information Law in Pakistan. It is one of the best law that we have, and it's not. We don't have it at the federal level, but we have it in our provinces. Punjab is the very good. It has a very good legislation. Another province has a good legislation, but then again, it absolutely has no sort of connection with the data protection. I mean, because it talks about proactive disclosure by the government officials as well. So yeah, I mean, we do have it, but then on the other hand, we don't have any data protection law or policy, if I correctly respond to your question.
Certainly not like we have right now in Europe.
Yeah.
Not on that level has been introduced. Okay, any more questions here? Okay, right here up front. Where's the microphone?
Here's the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I didn't see you in the back. Go ahead. We'll come to you in a moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Nighat. I'm really amazed, and I feel proud that a Pakistani woman is talking about a topic here in GMF in Germany, which is engaging so many people these days all over the world. I am Kishore Mustafa. I'm also a Pakistani, and I'm heading a Pakistani department here in GMF Urdu department. My question to you is how to define harassment. I mean, we have heard a lot about what is happening on cyber attacks and things like that. But the question arises in a society like Pakistan, where basic education is lacking, basic information about technical terminologies. These things are lacking in that part of the world. So when we talk about cyber attacks, everybody who gets some kind of stupid message thinks that this is harassment. And in this respect, I would also put some responsibility on women and girls who just get feared of this kind of attacks. Also, why can't women fight back this war? Just ignoring certain stupid things, right? If you always emphasize on each and every message you get and you just define it as a harassment, it will multiply. Men want to misuse all means, and they want to do certain things to disturb women and not to let women and girls come above a certain level, intellectual level. So I think we need to talk about what is real harassment and where should be the boundary where you say, I have to go to some institutions, I have to go to some authorities to tell them what is happening to me, or just ignore this kind of things.
Okay, I think the question is really, how do you define the online harassment? What is it? And then the next step is to recognize it as such, and how can you prevent it? So how do we define online harassment?
Yeah, so the law that I have mentioned, it's like, it's problematic, it's draconian, but there are some provision which basically address the issue of online harassment, stalking, non-consensual use of intimate images, blackmailing, rape threats, death threats, hate speech. And the law is written very widely and broadly, and it can be interpreted in any way, you know, like the complainant want. And I feel that the harassment is very subjective, you know. Basically, it means that when someone feels uncomfortable by the act of the person, right? And I feel it's also the agency of a victim or survivor when they feel harassed. Why? They can't go to the law enforcement and talk about it or report it. And for so long, women have ignored, you know, the issues of harassment and the abuses that they have faced, and especially in our society. And I think this is the time, if women are speaking up, I mean, we should let them speak, specifically in the online spaces. And that's where, you know, we have seen the Me Too campaign, where laws have failed women for so long, not only in our society, but in Western societies. Why there was a need of Me Too in the Western society? Why it started from Hollywood. And we are seeing the impact in Pakistan as well. So I feel we need to leave it, you know, on the victim and their agency. And if they feel uncomfortable, they have all rights to report it, ignore it, block it, whatever they want to do with it.
Okay, I have a question. Just 1 second, what's the percent of women who are online in Pakistan? You said it was only 18% for the entire population.
Yeah, it's 18% internet penetration, but we don't have any data that how many women are online, because there are so many men on Facebook with fake accounts in the woman's name.
Okay, then my question is, because it seems like women, with a couple of examples, that often they're left alone. What can you do? I mean, the question I would have would be, shouldn't we do more to amplify these voices, to give them more of a sounding block? And if so, what can you do to do that?
Exactly. So, you know, like there are so many male feminists or men allies in our online spaces, and who say, I'm with you, I support you. And so many women as well. But what they basically do is that most of the time when they see harassment or trolling is happening, they act as passive bystander. And that's why I mentioned the role of active bystanders. Then when you see somebody is being violated by another person in the online space, just speak up, support that person. And then I think these are the roles that the people who are in the online spaces, they can basically do. But at the same time, I guess we also like tell the victim and survivor that they are not alone. They have people who can listen to them. And most of the time in our cultures, and I can safely say in India, in Bangladesh, in other jurisdictions closely to Pakistan, mostly women have no support, specifically from their families. When they are being threatened by their ex-partners over the intimate images or data. And I think this is where, we need to make this conversation normal and the discourse mainstream, that it's fine to talk about these issues. And I think that's where they can get support. But I also mentioned helpline. I mean, this is the first helpline that we have started, and I'm so proud that the same helpline is being replicated by another organization in Latin America. So people are finding solutions and strategies, and that's why I said law, tools, policies, these are not the education. Mix of all these strategies are actually the answer to all the issues that we are addressing here.
Okay, I know there are one more question. I said we would get back to you, so yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Makaya Bungano. I came from the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. On Monday, the Commissioner for Digital Economy, European Commission, Maria Gabriel, did say that we need to fight against the fake news. And she was just saying that the journalists need to learn. And when you were just talking, and then you just mentioned it also, your country is the country that many, the women, they didn't give them the chance to go to school. And I don't know, what are you thinking about that point of Commissioner, the lady who just said that we need just to fight against that.
The question of what we can do to fight against the spread of fake news.
Especially in Pakistan, where women, they were not allowed to go to school.
So so you mean that the lack of awareness of digital spaces, and
I'm just talking about the digital, because the lady, the commissioner, is for digital, and you also for digital. You were saying that you were just defending it. When they said that they wanted to be down, you said no, we can defend it. But meanwhile, we're talking also about the fake news. What are you going to
prevent the spread of fake news, and especially the problem with many women are not educated in the way that they understand this?
I mean, I guess there are like short-term solutions and long-term solutions, and for me, I guess like the things that we are doing, that identifying fake news and then letting the mainstream media or journalists know that it's fake news and what are the verification processes that they can follow. But at the same time, I feel that these are the things that should be integrated in our like from our school textbooks to and it should be in a way that the digital literacy shouldn't be static. It should be in a way that, because technology evolves so quickly. So I think it should be in a way where people can actually see what are the trends and the advancements that are happening in the online spaces or in technology, and how the education system of different countries can actually evolve with the same pace, the way technology is evolving.
I think that's important, because that comes back to the root issue of access and the digital gap. Then basically, we're going to end it right there. If there are more questions, you have your opportunity, because we're going to end this quick session here of